So, let's go ahead and add some final touch features into our visual novel, and then we'll set up our gallery. So the first thing that we want to do is set up some sort of UI confirmation menu, so that when we click a button, we get a choice as to whether we actually want to follow through with the action, such as when we click Start here. What we do is when we click Start, we immediately proceed on to a brand new game, whereas I would like to go ahead and pop up a choice saying, do you want to start a new game? Same thing for when we click Quit. Instead of immediately quitting the application, I want to pop up a choice that says, are you sure? We can do this through a UI confirmation menu. So let's go into our scripts folder in core, and under menus, let's go ahead and create a new C# script for UI confirmation menu. Now let's go ahead and create our confirmation menu as well. So in the VN controller, let's go into our render groups, and inside of overlay, let's create a new page, which is going to be outside of menus because we should be able to access it from anywhere. But we'll go ahead and create a new panel, and this panel is going to be our UI confirmation menu. Inside of this, simply what we're going to have is a title and basically a horizontal layout group for some button choices. Let's make sure on this main panel that we add a canvas group, so that way we can control the opacity of it and everything in it. And then let's add a little title text that will go up at the top of the screen. We should give it a good area of size so that way it can fit whatever sort of text we want to put in there. Give it a decent font size and make sure that it's centered. And check the alignment settings and make sure that these are set to centered as well. Next, let's add a smaller panel inside of here that will contain our choices, and we need to make sure that this has a horizontal layout group. Let's give it a spacing of 15 for our buttons, so that way they won't be all piled on top of each other. As we create the first button, let's make sure that the child alignment is set to middle center. Next, let's make sure that our choice button has a layout element on it where we can set the preferred width and preferred height. And of course, let's make sure that in choices, we uncheck child force expand and check control child size. That way we can use those preferred sizes. Next, I'll just make sure that the text is set to auto size with a fairly flexible size. Next, to give it a different look, I'll select one of the fonts here and then Control D on the material to get a new material type. And then I'm just going to call this an underline, or outline rather. Then I'll make sure in the material preset I select the outline version and then just give it a different outline here. Next, I'll go ahead and make it to where I can use the button behaviors and add a little animation on this to have the button float up when I select it. So for that, I've disabled the image on the main button and then added a sub-image right below it, which is behind the text, so I can control these independently. Then I'm just going to select my choice button and choose Create, where I will go to Main, Animations, UI, Buttons, and then I'll go ahead and make a confirmation button folder. I organize the other three into something else, but here I'll go ahead and make that enter and exit animation. Well, actually, I'll start with my default, and then I'll make the other two. So the way this is going to work is my image and my text, I'm actually going to create a empty, which will be the root of both of those items. Make sure that that is scaled up to the entire size of the button, and image and text should be parented to root. So if I change the size of root or move it, then I change the image and the text with it. The default animation will just have a keyframe where the position is centered on the button, so there's no change. Then the enter animation will cause it to rise up, and the exit animation will cause it to fall back down. With that in place, I can select Choice, the main button again, and go ahead and add button behaviors to it. And then just add the animator that's attached to it. Then I just need to check two things. In the confirmation button, I need to make sure that both enter and exit are not set to loop, so they only play once, and that default is my default state. And then, when I hover my mouse over the button, we can see that it indeed moves up and moves down so I can see what choice I have selected. And now, if we were to duplicate that choice button, we could have however many choices that we want as an option here. We'll go ahead and stick with one, and then disable that choice. And now we're ready to go ahead and create the script. One thing I've also chosen to do is add a root inside of the confirmation menu, which the title and choices are a child of, and add an animator to the UI confirmation menu itself. So the default state will have it invisible, and it will also be not interactable, and it will not block raycast, so we won't even know it's there. But on enter, we're going to cause it to rise up by moving the root up into its default position and making sure that canvas group of the UI confirmation menu gets set from 0 to 1, as well as making sure that it is interactable and it blocks raycasts. On exit, we just do the opposite, make it fall and fade out, and make sure the alpha is 0 and interactable block raycasts are false. Again, just making sure default is the default state, and enter and exit both have their animations not looping. So as we create this UI confirmation menu, basically another choice menu, but a little different. This one's going to be available for any sort of action that we do, and we're going to basically pop it up and just make sure that we want to use it. So we're basically going to use it just like a confirmation menu by checking if we're sure we want to complete a certain action. So when we want to call this to show up, we need access to that animator, so that way we can call those animations and make it enter or exit. So let's go ahead and say serialize field private animator anim is going to be attached here, which of course if we run start, we could get that on start. But just in case this is an object that has been disabled at start, I don't want to take a chance of it not being able to find the animator, so I'm just going to set it from the inspector. Now we also want the title text, so serialize field private text mesh pro UGUI title. Next, we also want the choice layout group, which is that horizontal layout group, but if it's vertical, we can just get it by a regular old layout group field. So serialize field private layout group, and this will be the choice layout group. Lastly, we want the button prefab. So serialize field private game object button prefab. Now let's go ahead and make sure our UI confirmation menu is selected and add the UI confirmation menu script to it. I'll drag in itself for the animator and just drag in the appropriate fields here for the title, the choices, and the button prefab. The button prefab, of course, is going to be that disabled choice object. Now, since we'll be creating choices on the fly, we'll want to keep track of them in an array. So we can make a private game object array, and this will be active options, which will just equal a new game object array with nothing in it right now. So let's go ahead and remove start and update, but let's create a new show function. So public void show. This is what will be called to show this thing on the screen whenever we want to present a choice. And let's also make its counterpart, public void hide, so that way we can disable it on the screen. Now, when we hide it, let's just go ahead and say anim.play, and we're going to play that animation called exit. Whereas if we show anim.play, the animation called enter. Now, before we do that, when we actually show this thing, we need to give it a title and we need to give it some choices. So let's go ahead and pass in a confirmation title. So string title. And we can go ahead and say that this.title.text equals the title that has been passed in, so we apply that to the TextMesh Pro object. And we also want some options that we're going to pass in. Now, we're going to do the options a little differently than we've done the choices in the past. In the choice panel, we just added a bunch of strings to the choices, but we're going to be adding more to the confirmation button options. We're going to be adding whatever sort of text it is, and we're also going to be pairing actions to the buttons when we click them. So we're going to make a new struct, which will be called a confirmation button, and we can add as many as we want to this function to show them. So let's go ahead and create the struct below. Let's make this a public struct confirmation button. And inside of here, we're going to have a public string for the title, and we're going to have a delegate which we can call. Or actually, not a delegate, but an action. So we'll have an action that can be executed when this button is selected, and we will just tie that to the button component. So we'll make this a public action called action, which is basically just a system.action, and we can put whatever we want in there. Now, also, we may want to close this menu once we make this choice, such as if we click no and we want to back out, we'll go ahead and auto close on click. Otherwise, maybe this button will actually bring up another confirmation, in which case we wouldn't want to auto close. So we'll define that right here. So public bool auto close on quit. And let's make it easy to create a new confirmation button. So public confirmation button, let's make a constructor, and then pass in a string for the title, an action for the action we want to perform when it's clicked, and bool auto close on click will default to true. And so then we'll just go ahead and say this.title equals title, this.action equals action, and this.autoclose on quit equals autoclose on quit. Simple enough. So when we go ahead and show, we'll take in the title, and we'll also take in a number of buttons. But so we don't have to pass in a physical array, we'll just convert any buttons we pass in into an array automatically. And we can do that with the params keyword here. So by specifying params, we could say confirmation button, and we can specify it as an array here called options. But when we actually call this, we wouldn't have to make an array, we could just pass in one button after the next, separating them by commas. That way it makes it easy to pass in one versus passing in multiple options. Okay, so we get our options, and let's just see if this is even valid. If we have options, so if options.length equals 0, then we shouldn't be able to do anything. And we'll go ahead and say debug.log error, and we'll say confirmation menu must have at least one option provided for the user to select. And return, because we'll do nothing. Otherwise, we need to now create the options. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a function that will create all of these different options on screen for us using that button prefab. So we can make a private void called create option buttons. And simply what we're going to do is we're going to take in the confirmation button array called options, which was provided above. So after we set the title, let's go ahead and say create option buttons, passing in the options. And now we'll go ahead and create them on screen. So just in case we have any active buttons already, we need to make sure they are destroyed. So for each game object G in active options, G just for game object, we'll go ahead and destroy immediate G, make sure it's gone. And then active options equals a new game object array, which is going to have the length of whatever our options array is. So options.length. And now let's go through all of the options and add them to this array after we create them. We can do this in a for loop for int I equals 0, and then iterate through the options that we have, while I is less than options.length I++. And that way we have the option at its current index, and we can also add it at the appropriate index inside of the new array that we've just created. So let's start by creating the button. Let's go ahead and grab the button that we want from the options. So confirmation button option equals options I with what we're working at, and game object OB, which will be the button we're creating, equals instantiate the button prefab, and we're going to parent it to the choice layout group that all of these buttons are a part of. So the choice layout group dot transform will be the parent. And we need to make sure that it's set active to true because by default it's disabled. Now, after we've got that, with it being active, we can go ahead and grab the button component that's on it. So that way we can assign the action. So button equals ob.getComponent button. Now we've got our button, and we can go ahead and add the click. So let's go ahead and add the action that's associated with our button. So if option.action is not equal to null, then we can go ahead and say that button and reference its onClick event and add a listener. This listener is going to be an expression which will call whatever action is set inside of the option that we've created. So we'll have that lambda expression and point it to option.action.invoke. And we're going to invoke the logic. Similarly, if we've decided that we need to auto-close when this is clicked, we'll go ahead and add hide to this button as well. So if option.autoclose on quit, then button.onClick.add listener, and we're going to add hide as the method that we want to call as well. So we'll execute the action that's been given into the confirmation button, and we will hide it if we choose to auto-close. Next thing we want is we need to set the text on the option so we know exactly what it is we're clicking on. So text mesh pro UGUI txt equals ob.getComponent in children, and we need to get the text mesh pro component on it. From there we can say txt.text equals option.title. And we now know exactly what we're clicking on. So we've created our button, and now we just need to add it to our active options array so we can get rid of it on the next confirmation menu. So action, or active options rather, active options, I equals the button that we've just created. So with that in place, we should have our confirmation menu working and ready for us. I'm just going to remove these unused namespaces up here, and let's give it a try. So let's try with starting a new game. Let's add confirmation and see if we want to start a brand new game. So our start button is calling a function on the main menu called start new game. Let's first of all go ahead and add a reference to our UI confirmation menu that we've just made. Just in case this is on a disabled object, we won't be able to get an instance, so we'll add a reference into our main menu. So I'll go ahead and make a serialized field for a UI confirmation menu called UI choice menu. So here's the start new game function. When we do that, we are just immediately setting the active file and then starting the coroutine for starting game. Well, I'm going to move that to a different function. I'm going to move that to a private void called, well, actually, I'm just going to call that start new game. And I'm going to change this to click start new game. So I will cut that and move that into the private function start new game. But when I click start new game, we're going to go ahead and say UI choice menu dot show. And I'm going to show a title which is called start a new game with a question mark. So that's going to pop up on screen. And then I need some buttons. So I need a new UI confirmation button, which is going to have a title called yes, and the action is going to be start new game. That'll be my first action. And then my second option that will be available will be a new confirmation menu, UI confirmation menu dot confirmation button, and this one's going to be called no, And instead, what I'm going to do there is I'm going to say just no action. So null. It's not going to do anything, and it's just going to auto close. So in the game, let's go ahead and drag in the UI confirmation menu to the main menu and give that a whirl after we click back on start and change main menu start new game to main menu click start new game. So then what will happen is I go click start, and then we get a confirmation here, start a new game. If I click no, nothing happens and we auto close. But if I hit yes, then we fade out and we go to the new game. So let's add that for our other options too. Let's go ahead and go to quit, and then let's make that a confirmation as well. Remember, this is in the VN menu manager. So click quit will have a new confirmation menu. So, you know, it would be good to have an instance just so I don't have to keep making references to the UI menu panel. So let me look at something real quick. Canvas overlay is just, if anything is going to be deactivated, it's going to be root. So UI confirmation is separate from that, so I actually don't see a case where this may be disabled. Let's just make sure that the UI confirmation menu is in a spot that won't be disabled, so that way it can make an instance of itself when we start. So let's do that just for ease of use, because there are several scripts that may use this. So we can implement a public static UI confirmation menu instance get private set, and then just make an awake function. So void awake instance equals this. And then for our main menu, I'll go ahead and remove the UI choice menu and just say, well, actually, I'll make a reference for it. So UI choice menu is going to equal UI confirmation menu dot instance. Okay, and doing the same thing for the VN menu manager. I'll come into the VN menu manager, and then I'll go ahead and, I'll go ahead and add it up at the top. Just make the UI choice menu right there, and then go ahead and click quit. We'll say UI choice menu dot show, and this will be quit to desktop question. So new confirmation button, which will be yes, and then the action will be application dot quit. But you'll notice, since this is a void function and we're calling it from the application class, it's not quite working because we're not doing it like if we were passing in one of our own functions here. So what we can do is just say that we're going to turn that into an action using the Lambda expression, and it's all good. And the next button we'll have is a new UI confirmation menu dot confirmation button, which will be no, and it will have no action associated to it, and it'll just close out. And now I can click the quit button, I get a choice, and I can say no, or I could say yes, and of course nothing happens in the editor because we don't have the application to quit. But there we are. Which means we just have our load menu where we can delete files that we should really put in confirmation there. So inside of our save slot, our save and load slot script, we've got this function called delete, which is called immediately when we click that delete button, and it's just going ahead and deleting it and repopulating the menu. Let's close that, and let's make a private void on confirm delete, and paste that in there. So with delete, what we will instead say is we'll grab UI confirmation menu dot instance dot show. Well, why am I going to do that? I'll just go ahead and do it the same way I've done the other ones, in case I want to use confirmations more elsewhere. So private UI confirmation menu UI choice menu equals UI confirmation menu dot instance. And then I'll just say UI choice menu dot show we're going to show the title, delete this file, and then this cannot be undone. Unless, of course, you go into your recycle bin or what have you and recover it. But through the editor, this cannot be undone. All right, and the action that we'll perform, our first choice will be, of course, yes. And the action we're going to do is on confirm delete. The next action will be new UI confirmation menu dot confirmation button, which will be no, and you know how this is going to work. We pass in nothing because it's going to do nothing, and it's just going to close out automatically. Now, actually, what I might do is I might actually add a new confirmation on the deletion to say, are you sure? That way we can stack confirmations on top of each other and see how that works. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to separate this into multiple lines now. So we'll have our title, which will be the very top. So this will be our title. And then our first choice will be yes, and we can confirm to delete. And then choice 2 will be no. Now, however, if we say yes, we're not going to immediately go in on confirm delete. Instead, what we're going to do is I'm going to pass in a new confirmation, and we're going to run that instead. So the way we'll do this is I will go ahead and cut on confirm delete, and then I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a new function, or basically a new Lambda expression, and we're going to have it inside of brackets. So we'll go ahead and do a tab, let me know that this is a new one, and then back out there. All right, so we can see this is a nested confirmation here. And what I'm basically going to do is just say UI choice menu dot show, and then I'm going to show are you sure? And my first choice is going to be, I will make a UI confirmation menu dot confirmation button, which is I am sure, and that action is going to be on confirm delete. Oop, but I need to make sure that I say new. It needs to be a new button. Okay, and my second option will be new UI confirmation menu dot confirmation button. No. Just no, or yeah, never mind. I'd like to see that text change. And that's going to do nothing. Okay, so we'll get our first choice, which will say delete this file. If we say no, we just do nothing and we return. But if we say yes, then we get a new choice, which says, are you sure? And we get new options. Only if we confirm that we are sure we want to do this, we're going to delete the file. Okay, so if we come into the file load menu, we click delete. Now we get a option. Delete this file. If I say no, it's just going to hide it. But if I say yes, then what's going to happen? Oh, yeah, I need to tell it not to auto close. Okay, yeah, so if I want to show this second choice, I just need to make sure that I say auto close on click is false. And only say that for the choice that I don't want to auto close, which would be yes. So if yes gets chosen, we are not going to auto close. We are instead going to show this new choice. Okay, so let's go back to the load menu. Delete. Delete this file. This cannot be undone. Yes. Are you sure? I am sure. Never mind. Looks like my text needs to be scaled a little bit. So if I say never mind, we close out. But if I go ahead and say I am sure, then boom, now we've gone ahead and deleted it. Now great, that's going to work on this menu because we've got the UI confirmation menu available in the main menu. But we just need to make sure that's available in our visual novel scene as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a prefab, come into main, make a new folder called prefabs. Inside of prefabs, I will make another folder called UI, And inside of UI, I'll drag in my UI confirmation menu. And then I want to come to my scenes and just drag in my visual novel scene so that way I can see it right in here. So if we go to the Veeam controller, then render groups, main, root, canvas overlay, let's add a new overlay in here, which is just going to be the prefab we've just made. So inside of UI, drag in UI confirmation menu inside of canvas overlay, and we should have our confirmation menu available in the visual novel as well. So I could save that scene, and then I can remove that and go ahead and load up the new scene, and we should be able to see it working. So start a new game, yes. And let's go ahead and just get to a different point. Just save. Let's go ahead and save it on the first one. Cool. Then delete. Cool. So in the visual novel scene, now we're being prompted for the UI confirmation menu. Say, yes, are you sure? I am sure. Cool. So we've got that working pretty nicely. And let me just check my quit button. If I go to quit, yep, quit to desktop gives me a confirmation as well. So it looks like everything is working well. So that's how we get a UI confirmation menu working. And that adds an extra little polish to our visual novel that just makes it a little better for the user.